Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. Assalamu alaikum, and inshallah today we get to the end of our Adawat chapter, which I hope you found to be informative and stimulating, even though it often goes into a lot of detail which we don't have time to kind of pick apart. But just this is the kind of signposts that would help you in your further study from this chapter, and then drawing from other sources as well, because it is crucial in tafsir to have a sense of the building blocks, the building blocks of the language, which includes the vocabulary, as we saw in the first few chapters that we looked at, what is said about their meaning, sometimes their origin, the varieties of meanings that those words have. And then, of course, you've got the asma, af'al, and huruf. So here, largely huruf, or things that are having some kind of amal like that, which actually connect everything together. And those connections then are part of the overall story of syntax and i'rab, which is further addressed in the following chapter. So inshallah, next chapter is going to be also a very nice one, a very summarized approach to i'rab, which is an ilm that we need to know a lot of. So in this chapter, you actually get a lot of insight into i'rab as well. So, and I think in Mughni al-Labib is actually ordered the other way around. So the rules which come in chapter 41 are actually at the start of Mughni al-Labib, and then he goes into the huruf in the way that we see here. So, لا جرم.
لا جرم. وردت في القرآن في 5 مواضع متلوة واسمها ولم يجئ بعدها فعل، واختلف فيها، فقيل لا نافية لما تقدم، وجرم فعل معناه حق، وأن مع ما في حيزه فاعله موضع، وقيل زائدة، وجرم معناه كسب، أي كسب لهم عملهم الندامة، وما في حيزها في موضع نصب، وقيل هما كلمتان ركبتا وصار معناهما حقا، وقيل معناهما لا بد، وما بعدها في موضع نصب بإسقاط حرف الجر. لكن مشددة النون حرف ينصب الاسم ويرفع الخبر، ومعناه الاستدراك، وفسر بأن تنسب لما بعدها حكما مخالفا ما قبلها، ولذلك لا بد أن يتقدمها كلام مخالف لما بعدها أو مناقض له، نحو وما كفر سليمان ولكن الشياطين كفروا، وقد ترد للتوكيد مجرد عن.
I mean, I wrote this translation, but I don't remember thinking about the word gainsaying, or where did I get it from, or why did I choose it. So I'll just highlight it just to give it some further thought. Gainsaying, let's have a look at the definition. Gainsaying, what fancy that is. I don't remember being as fancy as that. To deny or contradict a fact or statement. The impact of the railways cannot be gainsaid. So istidrak is a little bit different from that, but okay. I mean, let me say why it's different. I mean, it's lakinna is sometimes going to come in the case of something has been said to be not the case, and then something else is the case, right? So as here, وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانُ وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا. So that doesn't, of course, deny or cancel out the previous statement. Okay, so a bit like bal, I don't know if the comparison would be made here. There's a sense of, it's not cancelling out what's before, but there is some sense that there's something negative. In English, the words and but, right, we think of them as almost like opposite, but when you look at formal logic, and but are actually the same. Like there's no effect, or there's no effective difference between and but. We use the word but in the English language when something is expected and it comes other than what we expect, but it's still and. Logically, it is the same kind of thing as and. So it's different from or, right? If we say, I ate an apple, no, you ate an apple or a pear. That has got a logical difference between that and ate an apple and a pear. I can't really use but here, that's not really very useful. But if I say, I went outside, it was raining, but I didn't use my umbrella. So that you would expect that I would use my umbrella. But there's no difference logically between that and saying, I went outside, it was raining, and I didn't use my umbrella. Right? So, therefore, lakinna assigns a ruling to what follows, which is different from the ruling of what precedes it. I have a question mark over that. Let me see how it's written here. وفسر بأن ينسب لما بعدها حكما مخالفا لحكم ما قبلها. ولذلك لابد أن يتقدمها كلام مخالف لما بعدها ومناقض. But you see, وما كفر سليمان ولكن الشياطين كفروا. This is a certain type of use of but, which is like instead of that. So if we're thinking of it as the instead kind of but, then this basically this applies. It is not Sulaiman who did kufr, but there was someone who did kufr, that was the shayateen, right? So instead, but there's no actual contradiction between the two statements, right?
استدراك قاله صاحب البسيط، وفسر الاستدراك برفع ما توهم ثبوته، نحو ما زيد شجاعا لكنه كريم، لأن الشجاعة والكرم لا يكادان يفترقان، فنفي أحدهما يوهم نفي الآخر.
So this is more like what we're saying, to cancel a meaning which had been implied, or what you would expect, right? So if I go, it was raining, now you expect me to say, so I used my umbrella. I say, but I didn't use my umbrella. So in a way, there was iham, which I am addressing with lakin or lakinna.
مثل التوكيد، نحو لو جاءني أكرمته لكنه لم يجئ، فأكدت ما أفادته لو من الامتناع. واختار ابن عصفور أنها لهما معا وهو المختار، كما أن كأن للتشبيه المؤكد، ولهذا قال بعضهم إنها مركبة من لكن أن، فطرحت الهمزة للتخفيف ونون لكن للساكنين.
Okay, so I feel that there may be a bit more tahrir needed of the meaning of lakinna.
أداة لكن مخففة تأتي على ضربين، أحدهما مخففة من الثقيلة وهي حرف ابتداء لا يعمل، بل لمجرد إفادة الاستدراك، وليست عاطفة لاقترانها بالعاطف، في نحو قوله ولكن كانوا هم الظالمين. والضرب الثاني عاطفة إذا تلاها مفرد، وهي أيضا للاستدراك، نحو لكن الله يشهد، لكن الرسول، لكن الذين اتقوا ربهم.
Okay, so I'm just going to highlight these to kind of just remember, if I change one of the gainsaying, change all of them. Yeah. I mean, of course, I could just check it at that point, but to make it easier. Right, so here where it's mukhaffafa, it's a bit like what we've seen before with in mukhaffafa from inna and an mukhaffafa from anna. The meaning here would be وَلَكِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا هُمُ الظَّالِمِينَ. You could put it like that. I guess with ضمير الشأن as well, but the more natural seems to me وَلَكِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا هُمُ الظَّالِمِينَ, because it's there. Okay, لدى and لدن we saw earlier.
لدى ولدن تقدمتا في أداة عند. لعل حرف ينصب الاسم ويرفع الخبر وله معان أشهرها التوقع.
So keep in mind the relationship between لعل and asa. So asa we already saw, and then لعل was touched on there because of the issue of taraji and what happens when Allah uses that in a khabar from him, How do we understand that? Is there shak involved?
هو الترجي في المحبوب نحو لعلكم تفلحون، والإشفاق في المكروه نحو لعل الساعة قريب، وذكر التنوخي أنها تفيد تأكيد ذلك. المعنى الثاني التعليل، وخرج عليه قوله تعالى فقولا له قولا لينا لعله يتذكر أو يخشى. المعنى الثالث الاستفهام، وخرج عليه قوله تعالى لا تدري لعل الله يحدث بعد ذلك أمرا، وما يدريك لعله يزكى، ولذلك علق يدري. قال في البرهان: وحكى البغوي عن الواقدي أن جميع ما في القرآن من لعل فإنها للتعليل، إلا قوله لعلكم تخلدون في سورة الشعراء فإنها للتشبيه. قال: وكونها للتشبيه غريب لم يذكره النحاة، ووقع في صحيح البخاري في قوله لعلكم تخلدون أن لعل للتشبيه، وذكر غيره أنه للرجاء المحض وهو بالنسبة إليهم. انتهى. قلت: أخرج ابن أبي حاتم من طريق السدي عن أبي مالك قال لعلكم في القرآن بمعنى كي، غير آية في الشعراء لعلكم تخلدون يعني كأنكم تخلدون. وأخرج عن قتادة قال كان في بعض القراءة وتتخذون مصانع كأنكم خالدون.
عندك حاجة؟
Yeah, that third one which you highlighted is
All right, the same thing I highlighted?
yeah, literally, but
Yeah, so I'm reading myself as if I'm somebody else. And when I was looking at it, I think something else is intended by علق. So وما يدريك, or here لا تدري also. So this istifham لا تدري, and then if لعل is for istifham, it would be like لا تدري, and then it's kind of like a full stop, or we might use in English a colon. You do not know. So I said an indirect interrogative. I don't know why I have gone with that. Footnote, let's see. انظر البرهان قال أبو حيان والكوفيون يجرون لعل مجرى هل، فكما يقع التعليق عن هل كذلك عن لعل. لا أعلم أحدا ذهب إلى أن لعل من أدوات التعليق وإن كان ذلك ظاهرا فيها. So we need to be clear about what is intended by ta'liq here. I'm thinking now it's to do with not having a maf'ul bihi and just kind of leaving it almost like tamamul kalam, almost لا تدري, and then there's a jumla mufassira after it. لعل الله يحدث بعد ذلك أمرا. So if you're treating it like something like hell, you would have what do they think it means then? Hell? Will God bring about something new? Question mark. لا تدري وما يدريك لعله يزكى. How could you know, or what would make you know? Question mark. Because وما يدريك is a question. لعله يزكى. Will he be purified? So in such situations where something starts off as if istifham, once it is brought into a sentence like this, it sort of gets stripped of its istifhamiyya, and then we translate it with whether, right? We do not know whether God will bring about something new, and how could you know whether he would be purified? So actually I think that is fine, but then the point about لذا علق يدري, what do you understand from علق يدري?
yeah, I understand the same thing you just mentioned, which is just, it's not a, you would stop there, لا تدري.
علق عن العمل or something like this. I can maybe check on what's the best way to approach that. But I think the verb adara was connected to it is probably not it. In fact, it's kind of the opposite of that. Okay. Oh, we've got some chat here. Is however the same as but. Was that earlier? It's probably earlier. Yes, however, is the same as but in terms of logically speaking. It's just a fancy way of but, It's like, the meme with the Pooh Bear. And it's just like, you don't know the Pooh Bear memes? You got the sort of normal one, you can be like but, and then the fancy one with the monocle, and you'll see, however. It's just the same thing. Right. Lam, not lam, but lam.
أداة لم حرف جزم لنفي المضارع وقل به ماضيا نحو لم يلد ولم يولد، والنصب بها لغة حكاها اللحياني وخرج عليها قراءة ألم نشرح. أداة لم.
Let's just see if anything needs comment here. ألم نشرح. So the non-canonical reading here is ألم نشرح, because there is a lugha, a dialectal variation, which allows, or in which lam does nasb and not jazm. Does it?
ما تأتي على أوجه، أحدهما أن تكون حرف جزم فتختص بالمضارع وتنفيه وتقلبه ماضيا كلم، لكن يفترقان من أوجه: أنها لا تقترن بأداة شرط، ونفيها مستمر إلى الحال وقريب منه ومتوقع ثبوته. قال ابن مالك في قوله لما يذوقوا عذاب، المعنى لم يذوقوه وذوقه لهم متوقع. وقال الزمخشري في قوله ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم، ما في لما من معنى التوقع دال على أن هؤلاء قد آمنوا فيما بعد، وأن نفيها آكد من نفي لم، فهي لنفي قد فعل، ولم لنفي فعل. ولهذا قال الزمخشري في الفائق تبعا لابن جني إنها مركبة من لم وما، وإنه لما زادوا في الإثبات قد زادوا في النفي ما، وأن منفي لما جائزة الحذف اختيارا بخلاف لم، وهي أحسن ما يخرج عليه، وإن كلا لما أي لما يهمل أو يترك. قاله ابن الحاجب. قال ابن هشام ولا أعرف وجها في الآية أشبه من هذا، وإن كانت تستبعده لأن مثله لم يقع في التنزيل. قال والحق ألا يستبعد، ولكن الأولى أن يقدر لما يوفوا أعمالهم، أي أنهم إلى الآن لم يوفوها وسيوفونها. الوجه الثاني أن تدخل على الماضي فتقتضي جملتين، وجدت الثانية عند وجود الأولى، نحو فلما نجاكم إلى البر أعرضتم.
Okay, so is it just two usages? There's more. Lamma also for istithna. So the two most common ones are these two above. Lamma with the maldi, which is when something happened then, right? So shartiya, right? As you say. Okay. حرف وجود لوجود. I think it's shartiya, but just not really kind of spelled out. But the first lamma is related to lam, and some says lam plus ma. So there's an issue here which is often discussed, and I'm surprised it didn't seem to be tackled in these in so many words here. That lam هل تفيد التأبيد أم لا? Right. So if something is negated by lam, does it mean has not and will never, or does it just mean has not, and therefore leaving open that it might happen in the future? The more evident to me, at least, seems to be that it simply means has not in the past, and there's no ta'bid. Ta'bid would be to say permanence in the matter of negation, right? So lam leaves open the possibility of the future. There are so many examples you could consider, but wallahi lam yahidna, right? Those who have not menstruated or not yet menstruated, right? But it doesn't mean that they necessarily will in the future. It just means that with lam, it is negated. So in sort of colloquial speech, people say lam walan, right? Obviously, you can't say lam walan altogether in proper Arabic. We do have فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا وَلَنْ تَفْعَلُوا, right? So you can say lam and then lan, But you can't say just lam walan, you know. That's just a fun way of talking. Right, so lamma is explicit in meaning not yet. Not yet. So with lamma, it's not just leaving open the possibility that will happen in the future, but hinting strongly that it would happen in the future, but not necessarily again. Right? If you say that he hasn't yet come, you understand from me then that I expect that he will come, but of course, it could still happen either way. So the jussive particle with the imperfect, okay. لما يذوقوا لما يدخل, the expectation, because these people did have faith at a later point. Okay, it's more emphatic than lam, since it negates قد فعل. I find that a little bit difficult to see, maybe an example of where lamma is more emphatic, but the example is not given. And that the verb negated by lamma may freely be made elliptical. So here we get into other qira'at. Oh, sorry. وَإِنَّ كُلًّا لَمَّا. I've said this is a reading of Hafs as well as Ibn Amir. Okay, in Surah Hud. According to Ibn Hajib, this means they have certainly not been left alone. لَمَّا يُهْمَلُوا. So there's a taqdeer here, because they're saying that you can just leave off the negated verb quite easily with lamma, but you cannot do so with lam. Yeah. So like a lot of things, it depends on whether you accept the particular explanation that's been given or you prefer a different explanation. Because when people say, okay, this such and such phenomenon exists, I look at this ayah, that's got it. But then it depends on you agreeing that that ayah has it. If you don't agree that that ayah has it, then, okay, is there another evidence of that phenomenon? If so, that is the evidence and not the ayah. If not, then it remains unproven that the phenomenon exists. Okay.
He discusses ta'beed with lan, but not lam.
In lan?
Yeah, how does it, like...
Okay. I can see how the discussion would occur there as well, but I think the famous debate, if you like, is over ta'beed of lam.
Interesting. It's just interesting because, what was it? فَإِذْ لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا وَلَنْ تَفْعَلُوا. Right?
Yes. So it's not that it was it's absolutely necessary to say وَلَنْ تَفْعَلُوا.
Okay.
But it has a strong rhetorical effect. You haven't managed to do it, and as it happens, you never will. So you may as well give up now. So like, you didn't manage. You can go ahead and try. I mean, that's the challenge that's been given to you, but I'm telling you now, you'll never be able to bring something like the Qur'an. With lan being for ta'beed or not, I suppose, yeah, we probably will see a debate around lan tarani. Is that the one? I have a feeling. Obviously I've translated this before. I have seen it before. So, but still I haven't read it in a long time. But I have, my spidey sense is telling me it's going to be about lan tarani. Because there, again, the grammatical things, don't think that grammatical debates happen in a vacuum and that they are just purely, philological. It's linked to theological questions, exegetical questions. So the issue of can Allah be seen? Does anybody see Allah in this life? Does anybody see Allah in the hereafter? Is one of the things which was most contested and debated in early Islamic theology, right? Now we're debating, who went to a pagan ceremony and had water poured. We're debating stuff like that. Then it was, does the believer see Allah in Jannah? Does the believer see, can a person, can a Nabi see Allah before reaching the hereafter? So the issue of Musa alayhi salam, and when he said, he is told, lan tarani, does it mean you will never see me? And then does that be, go into the hereafter even? Or is it just you're not going to see me now, upon your request? You can say, okay, let's argue this from a linguistic perspective, but then the evidences linguistically can still be here and there. Once you commit to a theological position on the ru'ya, then you're going to say, oh, based on that, I insist that the harf means this or is used in this way and not that way, right? So bear in mind, a lot of the things that come in our books that are lughawi, they stem from something else or some debate that is actually about something else altogether, a fiqh question, wiping the head, is ba for tab'id? Who ever heard of a ba for tab'id? But, when you have understood due to other evidences that what should be meant in the ayah is some of the head, then you say, well, based on that, I see the ba as being for tab'id, right? I'm oversimplifying, I know, but just to show you how this works, it's not like the linguists sit there and sort of figure everything out and then everybody takes the evidence from the linguists and just accepts it as it is. There is interplay, I have one book, I haven't actually read it, but just I got it out of interest for seeing how it would be argued. Basically, this book is supposed to be a refutation of Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim, and it's called something like Qawa'id Lughawiyya Bid'iyya, right? So it's by an opponent of these two scholars, and basically they're saying Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim all the time would make up linguistic rules to justify their position, right? So that is we'll need to dip into that. But it's an interesting notion, right? So if somebody wants to say, make their point very convincing, if they make it as a lughawi point, you find it hard to argue against that. If you just say, well, I believe that this interpretation is like this. But if you say, well, actually what's happening is this follows this rule. And this rule, I have these shawahid for it from the poetry. But then, of course, I've interpreted the poetry in a way that suits the point that I'm making. But it's not just Ibn Taymiyyah or Ibn al-Qayyim who's doing that. Basically, the whole thing is based on this kind of approach, right? So you understand that the course that we're doing here, I'm saying things, I'm not putting them to put shak in your mind or whatever, but I'm not saying basic points here. I wouldn't want everyone to sort of doubt everything that they read. But if you are aspiring to really be a scholar in this field, you have to know where things come from, how they come, and therefore be able to treat them with the respect, but also the right level of caution and the right level of nadar and criticality that they deserve, right? So when someone says, absolutely, lan is for ta'bid, maybe that's just because they belong to a certain sect, which says, there is no ru'ya of Allah, right? So if you're, like people say, reading the Kashaf of Zamakhshari, and the Mu'tazila deny the ru'ya, right? So, I'm not saying he necessarily says this about lan, but what I'm saying is you read certain things there and you want to just take it for, Zamakhshari is the Imam of them, Imam al-Mufassirin, they usually say al-Tabari, but he's one of the Imams of Balagha and Tafsir. So you want to take it, take his point and trust it, but based on what many scholars have said about Zamakhshari's tafsir, that he, is poisoning you surreptitiously and slowly with his i'tizaliyat. And what that means is he'll tell you something and it'll make it sound like it's a rule, but it's only a rule because that rule suits them. And because it's based on what he and his school consider to be muhkamat, right? So, I don't know if we talked about muhkam and mutashabih a little bit in this course. I think we did. We talked about ayah 7 of Ali Imran. But the basic point that for one school, these are the muhkamat, and then the other things have to be explained away as mutashabihat. For the other school, those things that they're calling mutashabihat are actually the muhkamat. Like, for example, the ayahs that say, you will see Allah. For the Mu'tazila, those are mutashabihat. We have to ta'wil them because, of course, that's impossible, right? According to what? Their usul. So, is it according to the Quran and the Sunnah, and therefore their usul are based on them? They would see it that way, right? But others will say, no, your usul are actually wrong, and you base them on weak evidences. So, it becomes this battle over which evidences are actually the muhkam ones, right? And then stemming from that would be certain extractions about language, because certain linguistic conclusions will be drawn from, oh, well, I have to do ta'wil of this linguistic thing because of muhkam al-Qur'an, right? And if the Mu'tazila see something as muhkam al-Qur'an, such as you cannot see Allah, by the way, because there are ayat that, you know, the zahir is like that, لا تدركه الأبصار وهو يدرك الأبصار. Right. I was just reading today a nice quote I didn't come across before from Ikrimah, that he was asked about this, you know, when it comes to seeing Allah, that the Prophet ﷺ might have seen Allah in the Mi'raj. And then, you know, he was asked, but doesn't Allah say, لا تدركه الأبصار وهو يدرك الأبصار? He says, you know, when you look up, you see the sky, don't you? Did you see all the sky? All its sides and all its corners? No, but you still saw it. You can still say you saw the sky, even if you didn't see all of it. And why he's saying that is because idrak, one of the interpretations of la tudrikuhu, is la tuhitu bihi. Like, so vision cannot encompass him. You cannot see all of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are debates that raged in the early stage between the different theological schools. And then certain linguistic principles will be based upon these things, which were important points of debate. Right. And we didn't even get onto land, but when we do, we'll just, you know, take it اختصارا.
يقال فيها حرف وجود لوجود، وذهب جماعة إلى أنها حينئذ ظرف بمعنى حين، وقال ابن مالك بمعنى إذ، لأنها مختصة بالماضي وبالإضافة الجملة. وجواب هذه يكون ماضيا كما تقدم، وجملة اسمية بالفاء أو بإذا الفجائية، نحو فلما نجاهم إلى البر فمنهم مقتصد، فلما نجاهم إلى البر إذا هم يشركون. وجوز ابن عصفور كونه مضارعا، نحو فلما ذهب عن إبراهيم الروع وجاءته البشرى يجادلنا، وأوله غيره يجادلنا. الوجه الثالث أن تكون حرف استثناء فتدخل على الإسمية والماضية، نحو إن كل نفس لما عليها حافظ بالتشديد، أي إلا، وإن كل ذلك لما متاع الحياة الدنيا، أي إلا.
What happened here? وأوله غير بجادلنا. Okay. Others interpret it in terms of the perfect verb. Okay, so Sarah is asking, is it certain linguistic principles or linguistic principles in general? This thing that I'm saying. I would say certain linguistic. I'm not going to say everything is affected by, you know, theology, right? But I would say everything is based on, obviously, transmission combined with reasoning, combined with common sense, logic, which the scholars applied when they reason things out. So when they're using their reason, they would eliminate certain possibilities that for them are impossible, right? i.e. they don't make sense. And if theologically for you seeing God is impossible, you consider it mustahil, then you would just simply say, well, therefore, you know, obviously this can't mean that, and so then I have to find a way to show what it does mean and do ta'wil of this harf in a certain way that would remove the impossibility, right, and the absurdity. So it's not necessarily that, you know, they were being and you know, plotting against the Arabic language, but just that the thought process is affected by all sorts of things, including theological debates, right? Because, you know, this underpins the thought structure in Islamic sciences, right? So in a way, you've got the furu', which is like fiqh, and basically this is furu', and then you've got usul. And often people say usul al-fiqh, and they say usul, they just mean usul al-fiqh, but we have usul al-fiqh, we have usul al-din. The usuliyun, right? I know people translate it as fundamentalists, in the modern times. But usuliyun, sometimes when people say that, they mean the theologians. Sometimes they mean the legal theorists, right? But it's kind of the same thing, because usul al-fiqh also has got kind of two tariqas, famously. One of them is tariqat al-fuqaha, which is the Hanafis, and they have their way of rationalizing Islamic law. But then there's tariqat al-mutakallimin. So now all of a sudden usul and kalam have all sort of become merged into one thing. That is to say, there's a logical structure that underpins, and that is a view of the world, of cosmology, of reason, right? So I don't know where I'm going now, but I'm just in the meta level here. But that's just to say, like, these discussions about language happen in those books, right? It's the usuliyun who discuss, the meaning of the huruf and the meaning of language and how language applies to the rulings and so on. They discuss that in fiqhi rulings, and they discuss it in other things. So yeah, that's, maybe someone who's more theoretically minded can guide you through that.
أداة لن حرف نفي ونصب واستقبال، والنفي بها أبلغ من النفي بلا، فهي لتأكيد النفي كما ذكره الزمخشري وابن الخباس، حتى قال بعضهم وإن منعه مكابرة فهي لنفي إني أفعل، ولا لنفي أفعل، كما في لم ولما. قال بعضهم العرب تنفي المظنون بلن والمشكوك بلا، ذكره ابن الزملكاني في التبيان. وادعى الزمخشري أيضا أنها لتأييد النفي، كقوله لن يخلقوا ذبابا ولن تفعلوا. قال ابن مالك وحمله على ذلك اعتقاده في لن تراني أن الله لا يرى.
Didn't I say?
ورد غيره بأنها لو كانت للتأبيد لم يقيد من في.
You see literally saying, because of his belief about that ayah, he had to say that about this ayah, right? That's exactly what I was telling you. And because you cannot risk upsetting Ayat al-Araf by giving a meaning to lan elsewhere. So if they're switched on, they'll avoid falling into that trap of contradiction, right? And Zamakhshari was very switched on, don't worry.
لم يقيد منفيها باليوم في قوله تعالى فلن أكلم اليوم إنسيا، ولم يصح التوقيت في لن نبرح عليه عاكفين حتى يرجع إلينا موسى، ولكان ذكر الأبد في ولن يتمنوه أبدا تكرارا ولأصل عدمه واستفادة التأييد في واستفادة التأبيد في لن يخلقوا ذبابا ونحوه من خارج. ووافقه على إفادة التأبيد ابن عطية، وقال في قوله لن تراني لو بقينا على هذا النفي لتضمن أن موسى لا يراه أبدا ولا في الآخرة، لكن ثبت في الحديث في المتواتر أن أهل الجنة يرونه. وعكس ابن الزملكاني مقالة الزمخشري فقال إن لن لنفي ما قرب وعدم امتداد النفي ولا يمتد معها النفي. قال وسر ذلك أن الألفاظ مشاكلة للمعاني ولا آخرها الألف، والألف يمكن امتداد الصوت بها بخلاف النون، فطابق كل لفظ معناه. قال ولذلك أتى بلن حيث لم يرد به النفي مطلقا، بل في الدنيا حيث قال لن تراني، وبلا في قوله لا تدركه الأبصار حيث أريد نفي الإدراك على الإطلاق وهو مغاير للرؤية. انتهى. قيل وترد لن للدعاء، وخرج عليه رب بما أنعمت علي فلن أكون ظهيرا. الآية. أداة لو.
Was there anything you noticed there?
I'm just trying to see how len is dua over here.
Oh, the dua part. I think just in terms of meaning, to feel that he's saying I won't be is not the wajh according to that person. Basically, وَخُرِجَ عَلَيْهِ. Some are saying, well, we kind of feel like he should be saying, don't let me be. But it's a bit of a stretch to say lan is for dua, but that's just one way of trying to make sense of the meaning of that ayah. It's not too hard to understand otherwise.
حرف شرط في المضي يصرف المضارع إليه بعكس إن الشرطية، واختلف في إفادتها الامتناع وكيفية إفادتها إياه على أقوال.
You know, if you want to, you could tell your parents that you're studying, you can write it in the text, I'm studying law. And you'll, you know, you could do a doctorate in law.
أحدها أنها لا تفيده بوجه، ولا تدل على امتناع الشرط ولا امتناع الجواب، بل هي لمجرد ربط الجواب بالشرط دالة على التعليق في الماضي، كما دلت أن على التعليق في المستقبل، ولم تدل بالإجماع على امتناع ولا ثبوت. قال ابن هشام: وهذا القول كإنكار الضروريات، إذ فهم الامتناع منها كالبديهي، فإن كل من سمع لو فعل فهم عدم وقوع الفعل من غير تردد، ولهذا جاز استدراكه، فتقول: لو جاء زيد أكرمته لكنه لم يجئ.
You saw the sentence earlier.
القول الثاني وهو لسيبويه، قال: إنها حرف لما كان سيقع لوقوع غيره، أي أنها تقتضي فعلا ماضيا كان يتوقع ثبوته لثبوت غيره، والمتوقع غير واقع، فكأنه قال: حرف يقتضي فعلا امتنع لامتناع ما كان يثبت لثبوته. القول الثالث وهو المشهور على ألسنة النحاة ومشى عليه المعربون، أنها حرف امتناع لامتناع، أي يدل على امتناع الجواب لامتناع الشرط، فقولك لو جئت لأكرمتك دال على امتناع الإكرام لامتناع المجيء، واعترض بعدم امتناع المجيء، واعترض بعدم امتناع الجواب في مواضع كثيرة، كقوله تعالى: ولو أنما في الأرض من شجرة أقلام والبحر يمده من بعده 7 أبحر ما نفدت كلمات الله. وقوله: ولو أسمعهم لتولوا، فإن عدم النفاد عند فقد ما ذكر، والتولي عند عدم الإسماع أولى. والقول الرابع وهو لابن مالك، أنها حرف يقتضي امتناع ما يليه واستلزامه لتاليه من غير تعرض لنفي التالي. قال: فقيام زيد من قولك لو قام زيد قام عمرو محكوم بانتفائه وبكونه مستلزما ثبوته لثبوت قيام من عمرو، وهل وقع لعمرو قيام آخر غير اللازم عن قيام زيد أو ليس له؟ لا تعرض لذلك. قال ابن هشام: وهذه أجود العبارات.
Like with the best of the definitions, you know, explanations of law and how it works. حرف تقتضي امتناع ما يليه واستلزامه لتاليه. So it could still happen that if you know لو قام زيد قام عمرو, if Zaid had stood, then Amr would have stood accordingly. From this low sentence, we understand Zaid did not stand. But we don't understand from it necessarily that Amr did not stand. Right? Because Amr may have stood for some other reason than Zaid. Anyway, according to Ibn Hisham, Ajwadul Ibarat. There is again in formal logic, there's a sort of situation where they say, if P then Q, right? So there are P and then there are an arrow to the right and then Q. If P, then Q. So each one is a qadiyya, it's a proposition. If, you know, this, you know, in the Arabic logic, they say, إذا كانت الشمس طالعة فالنهار موجود. If P, then Q, right? So the negation of this is to say not Q. From not Q, you can derive not P. Okay? You cannot say based on not P, therefore not Q.
Okay.
Yeah. If I say, if it's raining, my umbrella will be open.
Yeah.
So based on that, if it's raining, for sure, the entailment is my umbrella will be open. But if then I can therefore say my umbrella is not open, therefore it's not raining. This is the correct logic. Because if it were raining, my umbrella would be open. So since my umbrella is not open, it is not raining. This is a logical argument. But I cannot say it is not raining. Therefore, my umbrella is not open. Because my umbrella might just be open anyway. And my umbrella might be stuck open. So it's still logically true that if it is raining, my umbrella is open. but that doesn't mean that it's because of it, right? Anyway, these are things you should do. You should study, because then you can avoid falling into logical fallacies. Ibn Abi Hatim reported by al-Dhahak. Okay, here we go.
فائدة. أخرج ابن أبي حاتم من طريق الضحاك عن ابن عباس قال: كل شيء في القرآن لو فإنه لا يكون أبدا. فائدة ثانية. تختص لو المذكورة بالفعل، تختص لو المذكورة بالفعل، وأما نحو قل لو أنتم تملكون فعلى تقديره. قال الزمخشري: وإذا وقعت أن بعدها وجب كون خبرها فعلا ليكون عوضا عن الفعل المحذوف، ورده ابن الحاجب بآية ولو أن ما في الأرض، وقال إنما ذاك إذا كان مشتقا لا جامدا، ورده ابن مالك بقوله لو أن حيا مدرك الفلاح أدركه ملاعب الرماح. قال ابن هشام: وقد وجدت آية في التنزيل وقع فيها الخبر اسما مشتقا، ولم يتنبه لها الزمخشري كما لم يتنبه لآية لقمان، ولا ابن الحاجب، وإلا لما منع من ذلك، ولا ابن مالك، وإلا لما استدل بالشعر، وهي قوله تعالى يودوا لو أنهم بادون في الأعراب. ووجدت آية الخبر فيها ظرف لو أن عندنا ذكرا من الأولين.
So this just shows you that, as soon as you make an argument that everything is like this, and you make a general rule, all that needs to counter it is one counterexample, right? But that counterexample needs to be free of ihtimal, right? Because they say either ثبت الاحتمال, what did they say? Or I say سقط الاستدلال, right? So if you say, oh, but it actually does occur in this other ayah, but if that ayah could be interpreted with and without that explanation, then it's not a counter. At most, it's just an example of where something might happen. So Ibn al-Hajib presented this, Ibn Malik presented this, and then Ibn Hisham said, we've got something much clearer than either of these, and stronger than either of these. Badun is an active participle in plural. They would wish they were desert dwelling. However, this was refuted by Zarkashi.
ورد ذلك الزركشي في البرهان وابن الدماميني بأن لو في الآية الأولى للتمني، والكلام في لو الامتناعية. وأعجب من ذلك أن مقالة الزمخشري سبقه إليها السيرافي، وهذا الاستدراك وما استدرك به منقول قديما في شرح الإيضاح لابن الخباز، لكن في غير مظنته. فقال في باب إن وأخواتها، قال السيرافي لو أن زيدا أقام لأكرمته، لا يجوز لو أن زيدا حاضرا لأكرمته، لأنك لم تلفظ بفعل يسد مسد ذلك الفعل. هذا كلامه. وقد قال الله تعالى وإن يأتي الأحزاب يودوا لو أنهم بادون في الأعراب، فأوقع خبرها صفة، ولهم أن يفرقوا بين هذه للتمني فأجريت مجرى ليت، كما تقول ليتهم بادون. انتهى كلامه. وجواب لو إما مضارع منفي بلم، أو ماض مثبت، أو منفي بما، والغالب على المثبت دخول اللام عليه، نحو لو نشاء لجعلناه حطاما، ومن تجرده لو نشاء جعلناه أجاجا، والغالب على المنفي تجرده، نحو ولو شاء ربك ما فعلوه. فائدة ثالثة. قال الزمخشري: الفرق بين قولك لو جاءني زيد لكسوته، ولو زيد جاءني لكسوته، ولو أن زيدا جاءني لكسوته، أن القصد في الأول مجرد ربط الفعلين وتعليق أحدهما بصاحبه لا غير، من غير تعرض لمعنى زائد على التعلق الساذج. وفي الجملة الثانية انضم إلى التعليق أحد معنيين، إما نفي الشك والشبهة، وأن المذكور مكسو لا محالة، وإما بيان أنه هو المختص بذلك دون غيره، وتخرج عليه آية لو أنتم تملكون. وفي الجملة الثالثة مع ما في الثانية زيادة التأكيد الذي تعطيه أن، وإشعار بأن زيدا كان حقه أن يجيء، وأنه بتركه المجيء قد أغفل حظه. ويخرج عليه قوله تعالى ولو أنهم صبروا ونحوه، فتأمل ذلك وخرج عليه ما وقع في القرآن من أحد الثلاثة.
So it becomes, most interesting when you relate it to the ayah and see, okay, how do you apply this aspect of it to the ayah? لو زيد جاءني لو أنتم تملكون, if you were the ones who, right? And لو أنهم صبروا, it's an increased emphasis. It was only proper, and by not coming he misses due right. How beautiful. لو أنهم صبروا. If only they had. It's more than just if they had, but if only they had done what they, if only they had exercised patience. How beautiful.
ترد لو شرطية في المستقبل، وهي التي يصلح موضعها إن، نحو ولو كره المشركون، ولو أعجبك حسنهن. ومصدرية، وهي التي يصلح موضعها أن المفتوحة، وأكثر وقوعها بعد ود ونحوه، نحو ود كثير من أهل الكتاب لو يردونكم، يود أحدهم لو يعمر، يود المجرم لو يفتدي، أي الرد والتعمير والافتداء. وتأتي للتمني، وهي التي يصلح موضعها ليت، نحو فلو أن لنا كرة، أي ليت لنا كرة. ولهذا نصب الفعل في جوابها. وتأتي للتعليل، وخرج عليه ولو على أنفسكم.
So he read ta'leel, but this is because in the other matbu'a is like that. Yeah, it's hard to see it as meaning ta'leel. Only taqleel fits the context, yeah. So even if, yeah, walau. So be, stand for qist and adl. But most of the time that would be against others. But even if, in some cases, it will be even against your own self. Lawla. I have a very special relationship and love of Lawla. And I did some بحث into ولما فصلت العير قال أبوهم إني لأجد ريح يوسف لولا أن تفندون. I won't repeat all of that. I have a separate video on the Ibn Ashur Centre's channel where I went through that. I missed one page from my bahth because I actually forgot to sort of continue on and mention some of the additional things. But, that's unfortunate. But still, it is a very extensive discussion of the ayah. And I read from this passage there in order to show, okay, this is what lawla is. Whereas in that particular ayah, 94 of Surah Yusuf, it just looked like almost everyone who translated it just imagined that lawla was something else, right? So a lot of them just translated it in ways that really don't fit what lawla means. Especially lawla an tufanniduni. So lawla has got some kind of negation built in. A lot of them translated it as if it said law an la tufanniduni. Maybe seeing that, okay, it should be interchangeable enough that if the negation occurs here, we can sort of slip it along there. And sometimes you can do things like that and it still works. But here, not so much, because lawla has a denotation. And crucially, lawla is shart, right? So we need to look for the jawab. And in that ayah, the translators kind of wanted to assume that the first part of the ayah is the jawab. So they wanted to make it like, I would smell Joseph if you didn't call me, yeah, or were it not for the fact that you call me Sina. But nothing about the start works as the jawab. If we accept that the jawab can be before, it still has to be la wajadtu, right? Or even wajadtu without the la. You can't just say ajidu riha Yusuf lawla. First of all, it's the wrong tense. Secondly, he says inni la ajidu riha Yusuf. There's no shak in there. There's no ta'liq of it on the shart that comes after. So lawla an tufanniduni has to have a jawab that cannot be the start of it. And some of them tried to get clever and said, I would say, if it weren't for the fact you called me Sinal, I would say that that I smell Joseph. But that doesn't work either. First of all, it doesn't say that. Secondly, he said it. He already said it. Inni la ajidu riha. There's no la qultu. In the tafasir, there's a few of the Mufassirin who kind of went in some directions like this, but largely speaking, especially after Zamakhshari said, جواب لولا محذوف تقديره لصدقتموني, and then others gave things that are close to this, أو لقلت إنه حي أو قريب وصوله, and things like that. So then it should be, I do certainly detect the scent of Joseph. Full stop. Were it not that you consider me senile, you would actually believe what I'm saying. Were it not that you consider me senile, I would go further and I would say, he's alive, he's nearby, he's about to arrive. And very few of them, and this is what I actually prefer and we ended up using in our translation, is you would realize, that is to say, you would experience that. If you weren't so busy doubting me, undermining me, can we say gaslighting, in the way this current, usage, people overuse it, but the idea is where you constantly try to, pick at someone's sense of reality. You're the one that's senile. You're senile. No, there's nothing. There's nothing there. So put your nose away. Right? They're being like this. Oh, إنك في ضلالك القديم. Right? So he says, if it weren't for your doing this, if it wasn't for the fact that you do this, you would actually smell this as well. It's so. Does nobody smell that? It's subhanallah. Some miraculous aspect is going on here. The shirt is coming out of Egypt. I said I wasn't going to talk about it, but I can't help. I love this ayah so much. So he is now miraculously, something's carried on the air, and if Allah carried it to him, he supposes maybe it's here in the air, like, and any believer, anyone who has faith, is going to pick that up as well. But they don't, they don't have the conviction that he has. And also, like, because they don't believe, they won't even sniff, right? He's almost saying to them, like, if you just, I say something and you immediately go to refute me and call me old and senile, couldn't you just go to the porch, open the door, step outside, take a moment, take a deep breath? You might smell the same thing. Whether that's true or not, but that's the implication. لولا أن تفندون ... Right? So the jawab is after the ... And literally, out of all translators, the only one who didn't mess this up is actually 3 people, which is Sahih International, and that's one translation, right? The only translation where they actually, dare I say it like this, bother to look at a tafsir and get a sense of what is the grammar here, was Sahih International. And there they understood that, and brackets, I would say he's alive, were it not that you call me senile, something like this. But basically they understood that there's taqdeer al-jawab, and they did a decent taqdeer of the jawab based on what is mentioned in the tafsir, whereas other people who tried to do taqdeer ended up with something not quite workable. So, as they say, كم ترك الأول للآخر. Yes, to be fair, Sahih International did okay, but astonishingly bad, really, honestly, from the rest of the translators. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Okay? Literally, there might be others that I'm not aware of, but I'm probably aware. Just to check, just to tell you, I looked at a lot of translations and I documented them in that video as well. It's not individual attack on anyone, but here's the fact of the matter. If you're a translator listening to this and you wrote that translation that didn't make sense, what was your process? What did you do to get to what you got to, right? I'm not asking Yusuf Ali and Pickthall or Muhammad Asad, people who passed. May Allah envelop them in His mercy. But, those who are going to do translation of the Quran, is there not a certain due diligence that has to be applied? When you see lawla, are you just going to look at this ayah and think, it probably means what I always heard that it means, because I read translations in the past, or I just read the Quran quickly like this and I was not reading a tafsir of it, and I got an impression of what it means. I think it means maybe If only you didn't call me senile. That would be nice. Some translated as like, don't call me senile. Some said, you might call me senile. How has that got to do with Lawla? What has that got to do with Lawla? أسألكم بالله. Okay, let's continue.
أداة لولا تأتي على أوجه. أحدها أن تكون حرف امتناع لوجود فتدخل على الجملة الإسمية ويكون جوابها فعلا مقرونا باللام إن كان مثبتا نحو فلولا أنه كان من المسبحين للبث، ومجردا منها إن كان منفيا نحو ولولا فضل الله عليكم ورحمته ما زكى منكم من أحد أبدا. وإن وليها ضمير فحقه أن يكون ضمير رفع نحو لولا أنتم لكنا مؤمنين. الوجه الثاني أن تكون بمعنى هلا فهي للتحضيض والعرض في المضارع.
So just to say, therefore there's a difference between law and lawla. Right? So law is imtina' lil-imtina', right? The non-occurrence of Q due to the non-occurrence of P, right? So law P, la Q. But there's no Q because P didn't happen. It's more that way around logically, but one might get away with saying both in a certain way, but logically it's not non-occurrence of P due to it's a non-occurrence of Q due to the non-occurrence of P, but at the same time the knowledge of the non-occurrence of P due to the non-occurrence of Q, right? So the difference here is with lawla, it is non-occurrence due to occurrence. So were it not for God's grace and mercy, none of you would be purified. That is to say, you would be unpurified. But the non-occurrence of the unpurification, right, is due to the presence of the grace and mercy, right? لولا أن كان من المسبحين للبث. So he didn't stay, he didn't tarry, right? Even with واو التراخي, whatever that the story from our earlier واو التراخي فاستجبنا له ونجيناه من الغم. No, he didn't stay. Why? Because he was from the musabbihin, were it not for the fact that he was among the musabbihin. So you have to get the logical direction and connection right, then you would see it in ayat Yusuf. I'm saying to you, don't you smell that? Don't you smell that lawla? If only you would read tafsir, you would smell the same. لَتَحَقَّقْتُمْ ذَلِكَ, as Ibn Ashur says. The taqdeer is, لَوْلَا أَن تُفَنِّدُونِ لَتَحَقَّقْتُمْ ذَلِكَ. Right? You would have experienced just exactly that. You would have ensured of it and even experienced it. And Sayyid Qutb said something close to this, but his ibara was qaliqa. شوية, I was not entirely sure what he was saying, but it sounded like he was saying like Ibn Ashur. Right. I might pull up that last page of the Lawla just because it's the new year.
أو ما في تأويله نحو لولا تستغفرون الله لولا أخرتني إلى أجل قريب، أو للتوبيخ والتنديم في المضارع نحو لولا جاءوا عليه بأربعة شهداء فلولا نصرهم الذين اتخذوا من دون الله ولولا إذ سمعتموه قلتم فلولا إذ جاءهم بأسنا تضرعوا فلولا إذا بلغت الحلقوم فلولا إن كنتم غير مدينين ترجعونها إن كنتم صادقين. الوجه الثالث أن تكون للاستفهام ذكره الهروي وجعل منه لولا أخرتني لولا أنزل عليه ملك، والظاهر أنها فيهما بمعنى هلا. الوجه الرابع أن تكون للنفي ذكره الهروي أيضا وجعل منه فلولا كانت قرية آمنت، أي فما آمنت قرية أي أهلها عند مجيء العذاب فنفعها إيمانها، والجمهور لم يثبتوا ذلك وقالوا المراد في الآية التوبيخ على ترك الإيمان قبل مجيء العذاب، ويؤيده قراءة أبي فهلا، والاستثناء حينئذ منقطع. فائدة: نقل عن الخليل أن جميع ما في القرآن من لولا فهي بمعنى هلا إلا قوله فلولا أنه كان من المسبحين، وفيه نظر لما تقدم من الآيات، وكذا قوله لولا أن رأى برهان ربه، لولا فيه امتناعية وجوابها محذوف أي لهم بها أو لواقعها. حاشية: قد نقل شيخ الإسلام ابن تيمية عن الإمام أحمد أن الهم همان، هم خطرات وهم إصرار، ففصل شيخ الإسلام هم الخطرات ثم قال ومن هذا الباب هم يوسف حيث قال الله تعالى ولقد همت به وهم بها لولا أن رأى
I
برهان
hope this is
ربه
not long.
والهم من يوسف
The
لما
tafsir of
تركه
the
من
ayah,
خير
you
كان
can
له
go to
به
the
حسنة
tafsir, you can
ولا
go to
نقص
tafsir
عليه
al-Razi if you
ولم يقع
want.
منه ذنب
Shaykh
أصلا
al-Islam is
ولو
fine.
وقع منه ذنب لذكر الله استغفاره منه
Not here.
انظر
No.
مجموع الفتاوى. وقوله
Oh, no, maybe.
لولا أن من الله علينا لخسف بنا وقوله لولا أن ربطنا على
This one?
قلبها
Oh,
أي
okay.
لأبدت ما فيه في آيات أخر.
So in the ayah, which is called a tale of, not the ayah, in my video on Ibn Ashur channel, it's called a tale of two lawlas. So I talk about this first lawla in Surah Yusuf, and then this second one, 94 above. So there are different ways to analyze how that lawla works, and some say lawla أن رأى برهان ربه لهم بها. There at least, although there's no lam, وهم بها لولا أن رأى برهان ربه, but you know you can make that case that هم بها is the jawab of lawla. You cannot do so in إني لا أجد ريح يوسف, right? But there's other ways to analyze the ayah. Obviously, we would always select a way that preserves the asma, but there are different ways grammatically to deal with that, which I talk about in that video.
وقال ابن أبي حاتم أنبأنا موسى الخطمي أنبأنا هارون بن أبي حاتم أنبأنا عبد الرحمن بن حماد عن أسباط عن السدي عن أبي مالك قال كل ما في القرآن فلولا فهو فهلا إلا حرفين في يونس فلولا كانت قرية آمنت فنفعها إيمانها يقول فما كانت قرية وقوله فلولا أنه كان من المسبحين وبهذا يتضح مراد الخليل وهو أن مراده لولا المقترنة بالفاء.
So that's quite nice there. While I talk about that, let me look for the thing which I mentioned. What would I have called it? Lawla. But the thing is that you see here, he's mentioned how there's a kind of general rule that's been stated, and that general rule does not work, right? So then sometimes I've said that, okay, obviously a rule that we've seen does not work. So then there must be some qaid, right? You remember me saying this sometimes? على الإطلاق على إطلاقها ليست قاعدة صحيحة. But if there's a qaid, then it could be rescued, or it could actually be correct. So here, someone has figured out that when Al-Khalil said this general rule that every lawla is for tahdid, that's to say halla, well, he's kind of figured out he means every time you see falawla, falawla. Right? Even then, is it right or wrong? I'm not commenting, but just to say that's what I mean by finding doing takhrij of the qaida or finding the qaid. Okay, I'm not going to go through this whole thing because I have a video about it, as I told you, but just to show the page that I missed out, just to show you. So what we just saw here by going through the lawlas is there's more than one lawla. There's the main lawla, and then there's one with halla. So you see lawla tastaghfiruna, lawla akhartani. It can be with the mudari or the maldi, right? So, but with the perfect tense, it denotes censure. Why didn't you? Okay. AFI mistakenly has al-mudari in place of al-maldi. Interrogator something. Okay. We'll leave that detail for now. But what you can see here, I've talked about here, the standard kind of approach from Zamakhshari. لصدقتموني لقلت إنه قريب لأخبرتك إنه حي, etc. Right? And these are some translations that don't say this, but they say, I would say that. Let me tell you that. As I told you, this doesn't work. Ibn Ajiba adds something else. لَقُلْتُ نُرِيحَ يُوسُف. Nuh Keller, verily, this is very, very recent, and it's based on collaboration and tafsir, and yet right? Verily, I find the scent of Joseph. Were you not to deem me witless with age? So the question would be, according to this sentence, does he find the scent of Joseph or not? Right? You start the sentence, he does. You end the sentence, he doesn't. It doesn't work. It doesn't in English. Sahih International, indeed, I find the smell of Joseph and would say that he was alive if you did not think me weakened in mind. This is fine. Alternative taqdeers that were given in 20th century tafsirs. I talk about that as well. I won't go into that again. Problematic taqdeers. Some early, Tabarsi. إني أقطع أنها ريح يوسف لولا أن تفندون. وأنه لولا ما يخشاه من التفنيد لما شك في ذلك. So I make some comment on this. I made it here and I make it in the video, which I won't spend the time on now. And then this is basically many of the translations fit in somewhere here, and this kind of equivocation and not quite sureification. هكذا ترجمه خلق كثير ولا أظنهم بنوا رأيهم على قول البقاعي. So kind of they're following something al-Biqa'i said, but I'm sure that they didn't, read Biqa'i first. Non-Jawab readings of Lawla, Al-Qasimi, Abu Zahra, these are all 20th century. Tabatabai, as if he's saying Law Allah, and another Shia tafsir here called Al-Amthal, and various translations that follow this idea. And then the page that I missed out, as I recall, was this. Al-Maturidi, obviously an early Mufassir, he says, وقوله تعالى لولا إذا كان على الابتداء فهو على النهي أي لا تفندوني. That's much like the translations of, say, Yusuf Ali. وإن كان على الخبر فهو على النفي كقوله فلولا كان القرية آمنت فنفعها إيمانها أي لم ينفع. So my comment is that there is no lawla for nahi. There isn't a lawla for nafi as such, but the nafi is a lazim of the other meaning, which is tawbih. So that's my comment here. I wrote this in Arabic because I wanted to show it to Sheikh Ali Hani. I did send it to him. I didn't get his comments yet. But Sheikh Ali Hani is also the one who worked with Nuh Keller mentioned above, right? So that doesn't mean that Sheikh Ali is responsible for how it was written in English. So النفي فذلك من لوازم المعنى في آية يونس كما حقه ابن هشام ولا أرى للنفي مناسبة في هذا السياق. So that to me is a bit strange, but I don't know why Al-Maturidi rahimahullah said that. Al-Mawardi says ثم اعتذر فقال لولا أن تفندون, and I don't really quite understand what he means. Al-Qushayri said something very nice overall, but وإنما يجد ريح يوسف من وجد على فراق يوسف. Wajada here, he's using a kind of he's using jinas, right? So someone who is overcome with وجد. فلا يعرف ريح الأحباب إلا الأحباب وأما على الأجانب فهذا حديث مشكل إذ أن يكون للإنسان ريح يقال لفظ. So this is like links to the way that I was explaining to you earlier, doesn't it? ويقال لفظ الريح ها هنا توسع فيقال هبت رياح فلان ويقال إني لا أجد ريح الفتنة وغير ذلك. قالوا جل ذكره لولا أن تفندون تفرس فيهم أنهم يبسطون لسان الملامة فلم ينجع فيهم قوله فزادوا في الملامة. So where did I put this? Non-Jawab readings, and these are the sort of early alternatives. Right, so that way I feel a bit better that I now did the last page of the document as well.
How does he get that nahi? Was it nahi? That lawla in the beginning of the thing?
He just said he said it could be nahi, but then when we review...
Does he give any examples or evidences or anything like that?
No, what you see is what he said in the tafsir. I think Al-Maturidi's tafsir, although it has been edited, it still looks sketchy and a bit like the I don't know if it's maybe the editors could have done a better job. I don't know if that's the issue or just like something about how it was written down, transcribed. It's sometimes hard to grasp, but I find it that way. That's maybe just my limitation. But there are other tafasir that you'd think would be just as challenging that I find fine. But al-Maturidi, I find difficult. Some people, when they watched that video, they started criticizing me for having criticized a certain translator. But they didn't mind that I would criticize like al-Maturidi and, Mufassirin who are actually much, much greater than any of the translators. And I have the gall and the audacity to challenge them. May Allah, forgive me if I'm wrong. But, I'm just saying how I see it. And, if I'm wrong, then I hope that people with more knowledge will clarify the matter. Okay, لوما.
أداة لوما بمنزلة لولا. قال الله تعالى لو ما تأتينا بالملائكة. وقال المالقي لم ترد إلا للتحضيض.
مالقي, yeah. So it's equivalent to لولا, but only really in this sense here. التحضيض. العرض.
أداة ليت حرف ينصب الاسم ويرفع الخبر ومعناه التمني. وقال التنوخي إنها تفيد تأكيده. أداة ليس فعل جامد ومن ثم ادعى قوم حرفيته ومعناه نفي مضمون الجملة في الحال ونفي غيره بالقرينة.
Is there a more normal word for tamanni than wishfulness? It looks funny to me, but what else do we call tamanni? So raja and taraji is like hoping, because hope has some expectation in it. Wishfulness, is there like a standard word that people use for tamanni? Yeah, according to Tanukhi.
Is it Tanukhi?
Earlier on, I think I had Tanukhi. But maybe we'll check that as well. It denotes emphasis of this meaning. Laysa. This is a big thing.
وقيل هي لنفي الحال وغيره. وقواه ابن الحاجب بقوله تعالى ألا يوم يأتيهم ليس مصروفا عنهم فإنه نفي للمستقبل. قال ابن مالك وترد للنفي العام المستغرق المراد به الجنس كلا للتبرئة وهو مما يغفل عنه وخرج عليه ليس لهم طعام إلا من ضريع. أداة ما اسمية وحرفية. فالاسمية ترد موصولة بمعنى الذي نحو ما عندكم ينفد وما عند الله باق. ويستوي فيهما المذكر والمؤنث والمفرد والمثنى والجمع. والغالب استعمالها فيما لا يعلم وقد تستعمل في العالم نحو والسماء وما بناها. ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد أي الله عز وجل. ويجوز في ضميرها مراعاة اللفظ والمعنى. واجتمع في قوله تعالى ويعبدون من دون الله ما لا يملك لهم رزقا من السماوات والأرض شيئا ولا يستطيعون. وهذه معرفة بخلاف الباقي. وتأتي استفهامية بمعنى أي شيء ويسأل بها عن أعيان ما لا يعقل وأجناسه وصفاته وأجناس العقلاء وأنواعهم وصفاتهم نحو ما هي ما لونها ما ولاهم وما تلك بيمينك وما الرحمن بغافل. ولا يسأل بها عن أعيان أولي العلم خلافا لمن أجازه. وأما قول فرعون وما رب العالمين فإنه قاله جهلا ولهذا أجابه موسى بالصفة. ويجب حذف ألفها إذا جرت وإبقاء الفتحة دليلا عليها فرقا بينها وبين الموصولة نحو عما يتساءلون فيما أنت من ذكراها لم تقولون ما لا تفعلون بما يرجع المرسلون. وشرطية نحو ما ننسخ من آية أو ننسها وما تفعلوا من خير يعلمه الله فما استقاموا لكم فاستقيموا لهم منصوبة بالفعل بعدها. وتأتي تعجبية نحو فما أصبرهم على النار قتل الإنسان ما أكفره. ولا ثالث لهما في القرآن إلا في قراءة سعيد بن جبير ما غرك بربك الكريم. ومحلها بالابتداء وما بعدها خبر وهي نكرة تامة. ونكرة موصوفة نحو بعوضة فما فوقها نعم ما يعظكم أي نعم شيئا يعظكم به. وغير موصوفة نحو فنعم ما هي أي نعم شيئا هي. وأما الحرفية ترد مصدرية إما زمانية نحو فاتقوا الله ما استطعتم أي مدة استطاعتكم أو غير زمانية نحو فذوقوا بما نسيتم أي بنسيانكم. وتأتي نافية وهي إما عاملة أو غير عاملة. فالعاملة تعمل عمل ليس، نحو ما هذا بشرا، ما هن أمهاتهم، فما منكم من أحد عنه حاجزين، ولا رابع لها في القرآن. وأما غير العاملة نحو وما تنفقون إلا ابتغاء وجه الله فما ربحت تجارتهم. قال ابن الحاجب.
So this the amila is known as ma hijaziyya, right? But I haven't said that. Might be helpful to say that. Ma hijaziyya. Hopefully I'm just making that up.
No, I've heard the same thing. I must say that, yeah.
Whereas the other one is, as they say, tamimiyya, I think. But surely it's either everything is not either Hijaz or Tamim. So what does everyone else do?
وهي لنفي الحال، ومقتضى كلام سيبويه أن فيها معنى التأكيد، لأنه جعلها في النفي جوابا لقد في الإثبات. فكما أن قد فيها معنى التأكيد فكذلك ما جعل جوابا لها. وأما ما الزائدة فهي للتأكيد، إما كافة نحو إنما هو إله واحد، أنما إلهكم إله واحد، كأنما أغشيت وجوههم، ربما يود الذين كفروا. أو غير كافة نحو فإما ترين، أيما تدعو، أيما الأجلين قضيت، فبما رحمة مما خطيئاتهم.
I love that by the action blocking. I was having a good day when I translated that.
مثلا ما بعوضة. قال الفارسي جميع ما في القرآن من الشرط بعد إما مؤكد بالنون لمشابهته فعل الشرط، بدخول ما للتأكيد لفعل القسم، من جهة أن ما كاللام في القسم لما فيها من التأكيد. وقال أبو البقاء زيادة ما مؤذنة بإرادة شدة التأكيد. فائدة: حيث وقعت ما قبل ليس أو لما أو لا أو بعد إلا فهي موصولة، نحو ما ليس لي بحق، ما لم يعلم، ما لا تعلمون، إلا ما علمتنا. وحيث وقعت بعد كاف التشبيه فهي مصدرية، وحيث وقعت بعد الباء فإنها تحتملهما، نحو بما كانوا يظلمون. وحيث وقعت بين فعلين سابقهما علم أو دراية أو نظر احتملت الموصولة والاستفهامية، نحو وأعلم ما تبدون وما كنتم تكتمون، وما أدري ما يفعل بي ولا بكم، ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد. وحيث وقعت في القرآن قبل إلا فهي نافية إلا في 13 موضعا، وهي مما آتيتموهن شيئا إلا أن يخافا، فنصف ما فرضتم إلا أن يعفون، ببعض ما آتيتموهن إلا أن يأتين، ما نكح آباؤكم من النساء إلا ما قد سلف، وما أكل السبع إلا ما ذكيتم، ولا أخاف ما تشركون به إلا، وقد فصل لكم ما حرم عليكم إلا، ما دامت السماوات والأرض إلا ما شاء ربك، فما حصدتم فذروه في سنبله إلا قليلا، ما قدمتم لهن إلا، وإذ اعتزلتموهم وما يعبدون إلا الله، وما بينهما إلا بالحق. أداة ماذا.
Alright, so I was taking it easy that time. I've said 13 exceptions. There are 12 distinct phrases found in 15 verses. I provided them here as citation for brevity. And then he says حيث كان. So the reader didn't say حيث كان. This is in all the currencies, وما بينهما إلا بالحق, which are these ones that I've cited hereafter. Okay, and it's mentioned here. Ma is one of these ones that, often you have to look carefully which ma is here. Quite often you have to decide between ma masdariya versus ma mawsula. And sometimes there's ihtimal for both, as is mentioned, examples of this. So that is a common thing that you have to say. What's happened here? That there should be that there's a meaning that would come if you take them as masdariya, and a meaning that would come with ma mawsula. Right. What were you going to ask?
I think there might be a quote here that's missing where it says Al-Farisi said.
Right. Al-Farisi is up here.
وقال أبو البقاء.
زيادة ما مؤذنة بإرادة شدة التأكيد. So I just missed it altogether then, huh?
Maybe it wasn't in that.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Thank you. So I won't translate it here in front of you all.
ترد على أوجه. أحدها أن تكون ما استفهاما وذا موصولة وهو أرجح الوجهين في قوله تعالى ويسألونك ماذا ينفقون قل العفو في قراءة الرفع أي الذي ينفقونه العفو إذ الأصل أن تجاب الإسمية بالإسمية والفعلية بالفعلية. الوجه الثاني أن يكون ما استفهاما وذا إشارة. الثالث أن تكون ماذا كله استفهاما على التركيب وهو أرجح الوجهين في قوله ويسألونك ماذا ينفقون قل العفو في قراءة النصب أي ينفقون العفو. الرابع أن يكون ماذا كله اسم جنس بمعنى شيء أو موصولا بمعنى الذي. الخامس أن تكون ما زائدة وذا للإشارة. السادس أن تكون ما استفهاما وذا زائدة ويجوز أن يخرج عليه الآية السابقة.
So it says here بياض في الأصول whereas the reader has said something which I'm interested to see whether that might work. But where did he get it from? I don't know. So the only ayah that was mentioned is here. Well, the closest one. No, it's the same ayah. ماذا ينفقون قل العفو. So he said it could be istifham. You know, maybe he's right. But then there's no difference then between the thalith and the sadis in terms of it being istifham. So no. Ibn Hisham says, ماذا صنعت? ما صنعت and ماذا صنعت. But this doesn't come down to like a different meaning of ماذا. It just comes down to, do you see it as one word in tarkib?
Yeah.
Or do you see it as composed of two things that work together to give the meaning? So I don't know. I think it's bayadun fil asl rather than.
But I mean, if it works for this purpose here,
yeah,
it has to work here, right? Because it's basically the same thing. It's just is that.
But it's not. But I just don't. Yeah, I just I'm not sure that it's another takhrij in reality. Is it? أن يكون ماذا كله استفهاما على التركيب وهو أرجح الوجهين في قراءة نص أي ينفقون العفو. So ينفقون العفو will be the same either way. ماذا ينفقون ما ينفقون there might be a point, but then where did he get it from? Did he just feel? Was it just he just felt it was right and then he maybe stumbled on the right thing?
He's taking a shot.
He hasn't given the impression of, you know, nahwi mutamarris, but then, you know, maybe he had a good day. I don't know.
أداة متى ترد استفهاما عن الزمان نحو متى نصر الله وترد أيضا شرطا. أداة مع اسم بدليل جرها بمن في قراءة بعضهم هذا ذكر من معي وهي فيها بمعنى عند وأصلها لمكان الاجتماع أو وقته نحو ودخل معه السجن فتيان أرسله معنا لن أرسله معكم. وقد يراد به مجرد الاجتماع والاشتراك من غير ملاحظة المكان والزمان نحو وكونوا مع الصادقين واركعوا مع الراكعين نحو إني معكم إن الله مع الذين اتقوا وهو معكم أينما كنتم إن معي ربي سيهدين. فالمراد به العلم والحفظ والمعونة مجازا. قال الراغب والمضاف إليه لفظ مع هو المنصور كالآيات المذكورة. حاشية: كلمة مع في اللغة إذا أطلقت أفادت المقارنة المطلقة ولا توجب اتصالا واختلاطا وقرب إحدى الذاتين من الأخرى، فإذا قيدت بمعنى من المعاني دلت على المقارنة في ذلك المعنى، فإنه يقال ما زلنا نسير والقمر معنا مع أنه فوق رؤوسنا. ثم إن قوله تعالى وهو معكم ورد في سياق آية افتتحت بالعلم وختمت به، فكان السياق يدل على أنه أراد أنه عالم بهم، فحكم معية الله في كل موطن بحسبه، فالله تعالى مع الخلق كلهم بالعلم والقدرة والسلطان، ويخص بعضهم بالإعانة والنصر والتأييد. انظر مجموع الفتاوى.
I mean, okay, nothing against that, but I think what set them off was the word majazan. So it's like, no, anything but majaz. You know what we'll do? Like this. It's not majaz. It's just haqiqah expressed in a way that's not something. Anyway, technicalities, but ultimately, they're of the same belief in reality.
من حرف جر له معان أشهرها ابتداء الغاية مكانا وزمانا وغيرهما، نحو من المسجد الحرام، من أول يوم، إنه من سليمان. ومنها التبعيض بأن يسد مسد بعض، نحو حتى تنفقوا مما تحبون. وقرأ ابن مسعود بعض ما تحبون. ومنها التبيين، وكثيرا ما تقع بعد ما ومهما، نحو ما يفتح الله للناس من رحمة، ما ننسخ من آية، مهما تأتنا به من آية. ومن وقوعها بعد غيرهما فاجتنبوا الرجس من الأوثان، من أساور من ذهب. ومنها التعليل مما خطيئاتهم أغرقوا، يجعلون أصابعهم في آذانهم من الصوت.
So here I put, this is something that I raise with the Ibn Juzay students sometimes about min for bayan, to translate it as whatever God opens for people of mercy. It's awkward and clunky, and often our translator brethren do even worse than that, and they say whatever God opens for people from mercy. And so they just see a min is from is min. So we just replace the word min with from wherever it occurs, haythu waqa. But when you see something like this, then think about how it works, right? Yes, the of just about fixes the issue, but as we say, whatever we abrogate from verse, whatever we abrogate of verse, you don't have to do that. Whatever verse we abrogate, whatever sign you bring us, right? Min al-awthan, and this is a little bit different. Shun the filth, to break it up like this. Shun the filth, which is the idols. Now you can't say shun the filth of the idols, but that will be ambiguous, right? Because then it sounds like there could be the idols are one thing, and then the filth is of them and from them. Mm-hmm. But what is intended is that the filth which is the idols. So you could say the filth of the idols, and that can be understood correctly, but it can also be understood incorrectly. Asawira min dhahab. This is a min which is like from the substance of bracelets which are gold. How did I footnote this? Does this mean rather than the one immediately preceded, which is widely taken to be for tabiin, which is also described as bayan al-jins? I mean, both are tabiin, but I think there's a few categories of tabiin which maybe need some breaking down. في غير هذا.
والفصل بالمهملة وهي الداخلة على ثاني المتضادين، نحو يعلم المفسد من المصلح حتى يميز الخبيث من الطيب. ومن معانيها البدل، نحو أرضيتم بالحياة الدنيا من الآخرة أي بدلها، لجعلنا منكم ملائكة في الأرض أي بدلكم. ومنها تنصيص العموم، نحو وما من إله إلا الله. قال في الكشاف هو بمنزلة البناء على الفتح في لا إله إلا الله في إفادة معنى الاستغراق. ومن معانيها أن تأتي بمعنى الباء، نحو ينظرون من طرف خفي أي بطرف خفي.
So not like this, but in the ayah وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ, if you can understand, let there be, minkum, like tabaid. let there be out, from among you, from some of you, let there be from among you an ummah يدعون إلى الخير ويأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر وأولئك هم المفلحون. So does this mean then, and some jama'at use the ayah in this way to say that we want to be the ummah from the ummah that does the khair and attains to success. Otherwise, the min can be not for ibtida' al-ghaya, really, like a coming from you. So really the two wajhs that work is tab'id and then this tabyin, that is to say, a bit like this one, let there be of you, that is, let you be, you should be an ummah. وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ ummah. So you should be or transform into, in a way, an ummah that does all these things. And when you do that, you would be the muflihun, because those who are successful are the ones who do this. Right.
So for the sixth one, we said we could have made of you minkum.
Number 6, apposition. Yeah.
If we're using it as but, why did you shift from instead
of
in the first one to could have made of you?
Don't know. had coffee, was just using Yusuf Ali's thing, but I guess it should follow the same. It should follow the same to make sense.
ومعنى على نحو ونصرناه من القوم، ومعنى في نحو إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة أي فيه. وفي الشامل عن الشافعي أن من في قوله تعالى فإن كان من قوم عدو لكم بمعنى في، بدليل قوله وهو مؤمن. وتأتي بمعنى عن نحو قد كنا في غفلة من هذا أي عنه. وبمعنى عند نحو لن تغني عنهم أموالهم ولا أولادهم من الله أي عنده. ومن معانيها التأكيد وهي الزائدة في النفي أو النهي أو الاستفهام نحو وما تسقط من ورقة إلا يعلمها، ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت، فارجع البصر هل ترى من فطور.
So, I mean, this point could be made virtually at any point of our dars, but just like this brings to mind again what we've said about how there is a circularity, not a dangerous circularity, but a workable one, of the meaning and the i'rab, right? So we said before, al-i'rabu far'ul ma'na. So that's what we're seeing here. Imam Shafi'i is saying in this ayah, where is it? Where is it over here? فَإِنْ كَانَ مِنْ قَوْمٍ عَدُوٍ لَكُمْ. But he says thereafter, وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ. So, minkum or minhum usually in the Quran means one of them, right? Belonging to them. They swear that they are minkum wa ma hum minkum. They're not of you. They're not really one of you. They're not min nafsil jins, right? So they're not from the same substance. So when it says here min qawmin, it cannot mean that he belongs to that qawm, but it has to mean that he is among them. So that's why it says min here means fi. So if it weren't for that ayah, I mean, there might be other examples. Yeah, well, there's another example here. But let's just say, iddi'a, and just for the point of making what I'm saying, if there were no other example, then that linguistic rule was extracted from the ayah and not the other way around. It's not that the linguistic rule pre-exists and then is applied to the ayah. So keep that in mind. Al-i'rabu far'ul ma'na. One of the manifestations of that is the rules about these huruf and so on often comes from the tafsir of the ayah. The tafsir of the ayah might derive from other things, like here, the siyaq and the qara'in and common sense and, the fact that how min is used in other ayahs has a bearing on that, right?
وأجازها قوم في الإيجاب وخرجوا عليه ولقد جاءك من نبأ المرسلين ويحلون فيها من أساور من جبال فيها من برد يغضوا من أبصارهم. فائدة: أخرج ابن أبي حاتم من طريق السدي عن ابن عباس قال: لو أن إبراهيم حين دعا قال فاجعل أفئدة الناس تهوي إليهم لازدحمت عليه اليهود والنصارى، ولكنه خص حين قال فاجعل أفئدة من الناس، فجعل ذلك للمؤمنين. وأخرج عن مجاهد قال لو قال إبراهيم فاجعل أفئدة الناس تهوي إليهم لزاحمتكم عليه الروم وفارس، وهذا صريح في فهم الصحابة والتابعين التبعيض من. وقال بعضهم حيث وقعت يغفر لكم في خطاب المؤمنين لم تذكر معها من، كقوله في الأحزاب يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم. وفي الصف يا أيها الذين آمنوا هل أدلكم على تجارة تنجيكم من عذاب أليم، إلى قوله يغفر لكم ذنوبكم. وقال في خطاب الكفار في سورة نوح يغفر لكم من ذنوبكم، وكذا في سورة إبراهيم وفي سورة الأحقاف. وما ذاك إلا للتفرقة بين الخطابين لئلا يسوى بين الفريقين في الوعد، ذكره في الكشاف. أداة من لا تقع إلا
Happy with that?
No. I'm just curious
Why?
just because, okay, if he's saying to differentiate between the two, because saying if you become Muslim, then he was going to forgive you, right? So at that point, they're going to be one of the first group anyway. So what's the distinctions being made?
Very, very subtle. I don't know, but I just like to follow the kind of argument where it's being addressed to the unbelievers. It's like the fadl is not as strong as when it's addressed to the believers who have already, sabaqa imanuhum. That's what I see as the argument.
But don't you think that normally, like when you want to do tahdid or like convince someone,
You promise them more?
especially like al-Islam yahdimu ma qablahu, right?
Yeah.
That's what you typically get versus
Or yajubu, yeah.
or yajubu, yeah.
You could argue it, but I mean, there is apparently a pattern here. Here again, with istiqra, are there exceptions to this? Can we, is there a problem? If it stacks up that way, then you'd want to have an explanation for why there's like several ayahs like this and then several ayahs like that. And that does seem to stack up. So, there's further scope for examining it, no doubt.
من فترد موصولة نحو وله من في السماوات والأرض ومن عنده لا يستكبرون. وترد شرطية نحو من يعمل سوءا يجزى به. وترد استفهامية نحو من بعثنا من مرقدنا. وترد نكرة موصوفة نحو ومن الناس من يقول، أي فريق يقول، وهي كما في استوائها في المذكر والمفرد وغيرهما. والغالب استعمالها في العالم عكس ما، ونكتته ما أكثر وقوعا في الكلام منها، وما لا يعقل أكثر ممن يعقل، فأعطوا ما كثرت مواضعه الكثيرة وما قلت للقليل للمشاكلة. قال ابن الألباري واختصاص من بالعلم وما بغيره في الموصولتين دون الشرطيتين، لأن الشرط يستدعي الفعل ولا يدخل على الأسماء. أداة من.
Okay. Anything there that stood out? I was a little bit distracted there for a moment, but I saw the word mushakala, so it caught my attention. It's not one of the spicy kind of mushakala, like a theological thing, is it? No. Okay, we'll move on to mahma.
It's funny just 'cause I have mushakala over here. I'm not sure what I was thinking.
And the infrequent for the infrequent. So I said the frequently used word was used for that which occurs frequently, infrequent for the infrequent. So فأعطى ما كثرت مواضعه للكثير وما قلت للقليل للمشاكلة. So I didn't translate the word للمشاكلة, if you like, but it's kind of just, if I felt like the point was made without having to say, for appropriate matching or something like that. Mahma, great word. Its origin is apparently ما.
اسم لعود الضمير عليها في قوله مهما تأتينا به. قال الزمخشري عاد عليها ضمير به وضمير بها حملا على اللفظ وعلى المعنى، وهي شرط لما لا يعقل غير الزمان كالآية المذكورة، وفيها تأكيد. ومن ثم قال قوم إن أصلها ما الشرطية وما الزائدة، أبدلت ألف الأولى هاء دفعا للتكرار. حرف النون يأتي على أوجه: اسم وهو ضمير النسوة، نحو فلما رأينه أكبرنه وقطعن أيديهن وقلن. ويأتي حرفا وهي نوعان: نون التوكيد وهي خفيفة وثقيلة، نحو ليسجنن وليكونن، لنسفعا بالناصية. ولم تقع الخفيفة في القرآن إلا في هذين الموضعين. قلت: وثالث في قراءة شاذة وهي فإذا جاء وعد الآخرة ليسوءوا وجوهكم. ورابع في قراءة الحسن: ألقيا في جهنم، ذكره ابن جني في المحتسب.
So the qultu here is interesting. He says استدرك السيوطي الموضعين. Okay. Okay. There's apparently more that could have been mentioned, but what I was actually looking at is him saying qultu means that he was quoting from somewhere. He didn't tell us who he was quoting from. In the translation I just said, however, the light version does not appear in the Quran in other than these two places. Oh, then I seem to have maybe taken from this footnote. The authors overlooked several other occurrences of the light version and various canonical readings of the Quran, and instead cited two non-canonical ones. Okay.
الوقاية والتلحق ياء المتكلم المنصوبة بفعل، نحو فاعبدني، لا يحزنني. أو حرف نحو يا ليتني كنت معهم، إنني أنا الله. والمجرورة بلدن، نحو من لدني عذرا. أو من أو عن، نحو ما أغنى عني مالية، وألقيت عليك محبة مني. فصل: التنوين نون تثبت لفظا لا خطا، وأقسامه كثيرة. تنوين التمكين وهو اللاحق للأسماء المعربة، نحو وهدى ورحمة، وإلى عاد أخاهم هودا، إنا أرسلنا نوحا. ومنها تنوين التنكير وهو اللاحق لأسماء الأفعال فرقا بين معرفتها ونكرتها، نحو التنوين اللاحق لأف في قراءة من نونه، ولهيهات في قراءة من نونها. ومن أقسام التنوين أيضا تنوين المقابلة وهو اللاحق لجمع المؤنث السالم، نحو مسلمات مؤمنات قانتات تائبات عابدات سائحات. ومنها تنوين العوض إما عن حرف آخر مفاعل المعتل، نحو والفجر وليال، ومن فوقهم غواش، أو عن اسم مضاف إليه في كل وبعض وأي، نحو كل في فلك يسبحون، فضلنا بعضهم على بعض، أيا ما تدعو. وعن الجملة المضاف إليها إذ، نحو وأنتم حينئذ تنظرون، أي حينئذ بلغت الروح الحلقوم. أو إذا على ما تقدم عن شيخنا ومن نحى نحوه، مثل وإنكم لمن المقربين، أي إذا غلبتم. ومنها تنوين الفواصل الذي يسمى في غير القرآن الترنم بدلا من حرف الإطلاق، ويكون في الاسم والفعل والحرف. وخرج عليه الزمخشري وغيره قوارير: والليل إذا يسري، كلا سيكفرون، بتنوين الثلاثة.
So that relates to something that we heard earlier under kallan, and likewise this point under idhan was discussed earlier. So that kind of helps to complete the discussion. Okay. The latter non-canonical. Okay, that's fine. نعم.
أداة نعم حرف جواب، فيكون تصديقا للمخبر ووعدا للطالب وإعلاما للمستخبر. وإبدال عينها حاء وكسرها، واتباع النون لها في الكسر لغات قرئ بها نعم. نعمة فعل لإنشاء المدح لا يتصرف. الهاء اسم ضمير غائب يستعمل في الجر والنصب، نحو
You'd think that ni'ma would need a bit more discussion about its construction and the ism al-khabar and stuff, right?
I think he has a one for Bitsa too, right?
I don't remember there being much on Bitsa, yeah. Because it does require some learning. Na'am, how many times does it occur? I can only think of one. قالوا نعم. وأذن مؤذن. Any others? He doesn't give an example here.
ستقول نعم.
You have a look, maybe you see. Okay, the ha.
فقال لصاحبه وهو يحاوره. وحرف للغيبة وهو اللاحق لإيا وللسكت نحو ماهية، كتابية، حسابية، سلطانية، مالية، لم يتسنه. وقرئ بها في أواخر آي الجمع كما تقدم وقفا.
قل نعم وأنتم داخلون الصفات.
نعم وأنتم داخلون. Yeah. So this ha ضمير is known as ha al-kinaya. Ha al-kinaya. It doesn't get called that here. صاحبه. So it's good to know these things because sometimes you're reading a tafsir work, whatever it may be, and they just say, you know, وعادة الكناية على كذا. What do you mean al-kinaya? And then you're going in a different direction, metonymy, or you're going into books of balagha and stuff. And kinaya, al-kinaya just means ha'ul kinaya. Let's say this dhamir. Okay, and then the actual ha.
أداتها ترد اسم فعل بمعنى خذ، ويجوز مد ألفه فينصرف حينئذ للمثنى والجمع نحو ها اقرأوا كتابية. واسما ضميرا للمؤنث نحو فألهمها فجورها وتقواها. وحرف تنبيه فتدخل على الإشارة نحو هؤلاء، هذان خصمان، وها هنا، كما تدخل على ضمير الرفع المخبر عنه بإشارة نحو ها أنتم أولئك. وعلى نعتي أي في النداء نحو يا أيها الناس. ويجوز في لغة أسد حذف ألف هذه وضمها اتباعا، وعليه قراءة ابن عباس سنفرغ لكم أيها الثقلان. هاتي فعل أمر لا يتصرف.
أيه الثقلان. Right. حذف ألف هذه ضمها اتباعا. أيه. Interesting. Ibn Amr reading. There you go.
ومن ثم ادعى بعضهم أنه اسم فعل. هل حرف استفهام يطلب به التصديق دون التصور، ولا يدخل على منفي ولا شرط، ولا أن، ولا اسم بعده فعل غالبا، ولا عاطف. قال ابن سيده ولا يكون الفعل معها إلا مستقبلا. ورد بقوله تعالى فهل وجدتم ما وعد ربكم حقا. وترد بمعنى قد، وبه فسر هل أتى على الإنسان. وبمعنى النفي نحو هل جزاء الإحسان إلا الإحسان. ومعان أخر ستأتي في مبحث الاستفهام.
So again, it's not so much about the harf, but about the nature of istifham. And there is a chapter, النوع السابع والخمسون, which would be in volume 3 if there's a volume 3 in the series. I don't know. هلم.
أداة هلم دعاء إلى الشيء، وفيه قولان، أحدهما أن أصله ها ولم من قولك لممت الشيء أي أصلحته، فحذفت الألف وركبت. وقيل أصله هل أما كأنه قيل هل لك في كذا أمه أي اقصده فركبا. وقيل أصله هل أما كأنه قيل هل لك في كذا أمه أي اقصده فركبا. ولغة الحجاز تركه على حاله في التثنية والجمع، وبها ورد القرآن. ولغة تميم إلحاقه العلامات. هنا اسم يشار به للمكان القريب نحو إنا ها هنا قاعدون، وتدخل عليه الألف واللام وتدخل عليه اللام والكاف فيكون للبعيد نحو هنالك ابتلي المؤمنون. وقد يشار به للزمان اتساعا وخرج عليه هنالك تبلو كل نفس ما أسلفت، هنالك دعا زكريا ربه.
We need an entry for عفوا للاستدراك والإبطال والإضراب.
Question.
أي نعم.
وقيل أصله هل أمة. كأنه قيل هل لك في كذا أمة. To me, when I first read it, it seemed like two different.
هل لك في كذا أمة.
Like question, then do it.
هل لك في كذا أمة أي اقصده فركب. What do we say here? هل أمة. But then I haven't written here the ha. Azur to say, would you intend or approach this? And it says, is ummah meaning to intend, qasada, imperative verb. Then these were made one word. Well, it's altogether kind of weird, so so the translation is going to follow some of that weirdness, but I'll take another look at that. Hunalika. So we have hunalika in the Quran, we don't have hunaka. And we don't have dhaka. We have dhalika, we don't have dhaka. All of these are valid. And Marine makes some point about it, I forget now. Maybe the lack of the lam is more the Hijazi reading. So these might be examples of non-Hijazi styles of speech, which do occur in the Quran. Because there is, there could have been dhaka, but there is none. There's all dhalika or dhalikum, etc.
هيت اسم فعل بمعنى أسرع وبادر. قال في المحتسب وفيها لغات قرئ ببعضها. هيت بفتح الهاء والتاء، وهيت وهيت وهيت، وقرئ هئت بوزن جئت وهو فعل بمعنى تهيأت، وقرئ هيئت وهو فعل بمعنى أصلحت.
Right. أصلحت. So, I mean, on this one, I will tell you something that Marine sent me. Sorry to talk about Marine so much, but he's a linguist and it's nice to benefit. Because he watched the earlier video, by the way. MashaAllah. These mustashriqeen, they're watching, mashallah. To learn and also just to see as well, our classical literature, how does it treat things? A serious scholar and academic would want to know, right? And then even some of our own people don't want to know, So he's taken interest in that, and then he sent me some notes about some of the things in the dialects and languages. So about haytalak, let me see if I can find where he sent. Because in a way, like what we're seeing here is different from what was mentioned in the previous chapter, where haytalak was seen to be, okay, this is Coptic or something, or they said actually Aramaic or something, for, and then they wrote haytalach, and I think it should have been haytalaj, or the other way around. I think they wrote haytalaj, and it should say haytalach, which would be closer to what the Aramaic or the Hebrew is. So Marine said to me, I think I buy the interpretation of hitulaka. That's one of the readings here, right? Being intended at least as tahiyyatulak, which is what's written here. Although, also think that haytalaka is probably the intended thing and an Aramaic code switch, because the Aramaic word is something like haytalach.
Yeah.
So that doesn't answer the question, why would there be an Aramaic word for the wife of the Aziz? Is there something else going on? Also, or is she addressing Yusuf in the language that the slaves, because he's a Kanaani slave. Wow. There could be something extremely deep here. He says it doesn't work perfectly. But he said you have in Syriac, Aita, which means come. And they tell us that Aitalak means Ta'ala, Aqbil, Halumma, etc. Which historically definitely comes from Haita, but in Syriac it wouldn't take the Laka. But it's still a bit too good to pass up. So I replied to him something like, what's probably happening here is like several things are merged together. Because in my kind of manhaj, I look at how these things overlap. So maybe it's supposed to sound like haytalach in the Aramaic. Maybe it is hayta meaning come, like in Syriac. But the laka is pointing towards its Arabic meaning, where you're supposed to understand it as hitulak. Hitulak. Even if it is recited haytalak, it is still carrying the meaning of hitulak as a kind of tadmeen, something along these lines. So, and you heard this theory here first, probably, I don't know. But so the correspondence to the haytalak has been noticed before. That wasn't something just brand new or that Marine mentioned for the first time. it's been noticed, but we're suggesting here maybe some overlap of maqasid in this word, and the readings also point to the fact that this duality or more than duality is somehow intended and embedded. هيهات.
هيهات اسم فعل بمعنى بعد. قال الله تعالى هيهات هيهات لما توعدون. قال الزجاج البعد لما توعدون. قيل وهذا غلط أوقعه فيه اللام، فإن تقديره بعد الأمر لما توعدون أي لأجله، وأحسن منه أن اللام لتبيين الفاعل. وفيها لغات قرئ منها بالفتح وبالضم وبالخفض مع التنوين في الثلاثة وعدمه. الواو تأتي جارة وناصبة وغير عاملة، فالجارة واو القسم نحو والله ربنا ما كنا مشركين، والناصبة واو مع فتنصب المفعول معه في رأي قوم نحو فأجمعوا أمركم وشركاءكم، ولا ثاني له في القرآن. والمضارع في جواب النفي أو الطلب عند الكوفيين نحو ولما يعلم الله الذين جاهدوا منكم ويعلم الصابرين، يا ليتنا نرد ولا نكذب بآيات ربنا ونكون من المؤمنين. وواو.
So somebody asked me about this واو المعية. I mean, so it's not described that way here, but that's what it is according to that. And I remember in the Nahu book, was it Nahu al-Wadih or something that I studied years ago, the example that sticks in my head is Sirtu wan-Nila. Sirtu wan-Nila. Sirtu ma'an-Nil. So there will be some situations where the takhrij of the waw will be waw al-Ma'iyya. But most of the time there's no need to go that way. Here perhaps it's hard to understand otherwise. أجمعوا أمركم وشركاءكم. But somebody asked me on Twitter the other day, what about, وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَاكَ سَبْعًا مِنَ الْمَثَانِي وَالْقُرْآنَ الْعَظِيمِ. He said the books of Arab and so on are saying waw al-atf. Couldn't it be waw al-ma'iyya? Like I gave you the 7 mathani, whatever that we take that to mean, with the glorious Qur'an. So I said to him, there's no need to go to this kind of complicated explanation when the atf works just fine. And in fact, what is the difference between and with?
Yeah.
Right. So it's like that thing about and but, for example. The difference is too subtle for it to actually be meaningful here. So we gave you it with the Quran, gave you and the Quran, they just amount to the same thing. So waw al-ma'iyya is not something that you kind of reach for quickly. It's something that you kind of resort to if there's not a more obvious takhrij, which is waw al-atf really.
الصرف عندهم ومعناها أن الفعل كان يقتضي إعرابا فصرفته عنه إلى النصب نحو أتجعل فيها من يفسد فيها ويسفك الدماء في قراءة النصب. وأما الواو غير العاملة فهي على أنواع، أحدها واو العطف وهي لمطلق الجمع فتعطف الشيء على مصاحبه نحو.
So obviously not waw al-tarahi, right? There's no waw al-tarahi, doesn't exist. Okay, we got that? Good.
فأنجيناه وأصحاب السفينة. وتعطف الشيء على سابقه نحو أرسلنا نوحا وإبراهيم، وعلى لاحقه نحو يوحي إليك وإلى الذين من قبلك. وتفارق سائر حروف العطف في اقترانها بإما نحو إما شاكرا وإما كفورا. وبلا بعد نفي نحو وما أموالكم ولا أولادكم بالتي تقربكم. وبلاكن نحو ولكن رسول الله. وبعطف العقد على النيف والعام على الخاص وعكسه نحو وملائكته ورسله وجبريل وميكائيل. رب اغفر لي ولوالدي ولمن دخل بيتي مؤمنا وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات. والشيء على مرادفه نحو صلوات من ربهم ورحمة إنما أشكو بثي وحزني إلى الله. والمجرور على الجوار نحو برؤوسكم وأرجلكم.
It's nice to see that there. So sometimes, first of all, the existence of a muradif is itself, a point of contention, a point of debate. Is there such a thing as a muradif? When he says muradif here, does he mean an actual synonym or just something close to it? Salawat and rahmah, some explain the rahmah from Allah. Sorry, that salawat from Allah means his rahmah. Bathi wa huzni is one that I investigated as much as I could and found that Mufassirin were saying something that just didn't quite make me satisfied. Because they say bath is the utmost of huzn. So in that case, it's not usually the case that you'd mention the more intense thing and then the less intense thing and do atf of it like that. Like what would be the fa'idah of doing so? They didn't really clarify. So if you review my translation, you'll see a suggestion that I've made, which is tentative, because I'm basically that bath may be here. They say that it means huzn, but it's like they don't seem to have much by way of shawahid, but it's almost like in the ayah, clearly it indicates that. So we're not going to say it means the weak kind of huzn, we're just going to say it means the strong kind of huzn. You feel like they got there through a thought process that wasn't necessarily evidence-based, but was reason-based, right? And very reasonable, but not necessarily right for that reason. So the bath in general means broadcasting or, spreading something out, scattering something. So could it be that that's actually what it means here? Like him verbalizing and making known his sadness and the sadness itself. And in a way, some of the Mufassirun, with the way they explain it, is like that, because they say the bath is where it is the sadness that can't be held in, and huzn is the one that could be. But bath is that form of huzn which becomes broadcast. But what I was suggesting is maybe the bath just literally is the broadcast itself. But I didn't find any of the Mufassirin had gone in that way. Okay.
وقيل ترد بمعنى أو، وحمل عليه مالك قوله تعالى إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين، وتأتي للتعليل، وحمل عليه الخارزنجي الواو الداخلة على الأفعال المنصوبة. النوع الثاني من غير العاملة واو الاستئناف، نحو ثم قضى أجلا وأجل مسمى عنده، لنبين لكم ونقر في الأرحام ما نشاء إلى أجل مسمى، واتقوا الله ويعلمكم الله، من يضلل الله فلا هادي له ويذرهم، بالرفع، إذ لو كانت عاطفة لنصب نقر وانجزم ما بعده ونصب وأجلا. النوع الثالثة من أنواع الواو الغير العاملة واو الحال الداخلة على الجملة الإسمية.
So I should point out here, commonly people understand this and quote it as if it means fear Allah and Allah will teach you. But the ayah does not say وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ يُعَلِّمْكُمُ اللَّهِ. Does it? It says وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ اللَّهِ. And in English, if you just translate it, fear God and God will teach you, that's a valid translation. But there's iham there of one being mutarattib on the other. So this is an example of, again, people sort of looking at it and thinking it means something when the grammar doesn't really deliver that, right? The late Shaykh al-Qaradawi rahimahullah, he mentioned this actually in his book كيف نتعامل مع القرآن. I think his category was سوء الاستدلال, like how you have a correct point but you're not using the right dalil for it. So he said, instead of using this one, you should point to, for example, من جاهد في جاهد فينا لنهدينهم سبلنا. What's the start of it? The start of the ayah at the end of Surah Al-Rum. والذين جاهدوا فينا لنهدينهم سبلنا. So there are examples like this where doing mujahada, striving in the way of Allah, or مَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ فُرْقَانًا, for example. There can be things that point to this meaning, but this ayah doesn't really. So when you quote it that way, it also cements in people's mind a wrong interpretation of it, and then they don't hear what it's actually saying. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ, this is the ayat al-dain. And Allah is teaching you through all of this, right? It's not have taqwa and then Allah will teach you.
نحو ونحن نسبح بحمدك يغشى طائفة منكم وطائفة قد أهمتهم أنفسهم لئن أكله الذئب ونحن عصبة. وزعم الزمخشري أنها تدخل على الجملة الواقعة صفة لتأكيد ثبوت الصفة للموصوف ولصوقها به كما تدخل على الحالية، وجعل من ذلك ويقولون 7 وثامنهم كلبهم.
Okay, so this is going to come again here in this idea of the waw thamaniya. One of the funkiest and absolutely useless ideas in the history of Arabic. It's cool, you know. There's a gif also. It's cool. It's a great answer, but it's not true. But it's cool. It's nice, but it's not. Yeah. And as al-Suyuti himself, that's his point of view, that waw thamaniya does not exist. But what's the relation here? To emphasize its attachment to the thing described. Okay, so that's maybe okay. صفة rather than حال 7. All right, some details there.
النوع الرابع واو الثمانية، ذكرها جماعة كالحريري وابن خالويه والثعلبي، وزعموا أن العرب إذا عدوا يدخلون الواو بعد 7 إيذانا بأنها عدد تام وأن ما بعده مستأنف، وجعلوا من ذلك قوله سيقولون 3 رابعهم كلبهم إلى قوله 7 وثامنهم كلبهم.
وثامن, only the wow comes here.
وقوله التائبون العابدون إلى قوله والناهون عن المنكر لأنها الوصف الثامن. وقوله تعالى مسلمات مؤمنات إلى قوله
ثيبات وأبكارا.
والصواب عدم ثبوتها وأنها في الجميع للعطف.
If you look carefully at the ayahs, you would see the reason. Less so maybe in the وَثَامِنُهُمْ كَلْبُهُمْ, but that's different anyway because it's not a list of things and then there's the 8th thing in the list, but it's just before the word ثَامِنُهُمْ. So that's in one category. In the other category, التائبون العابدون الحامدون السائحون, then it goes الآمرون بالمعروف والناهون عن المنكر, because this is a pair, right? And then ثيبات وأبكارا, because it's one or the other in this case, right? So the types of description of wives that the Prophet ﷺ may be given, you cannot say ثيبات أبكارا, because that gives an impression of something. But ثيبات وأبكارا means all of the above, being thayyib or being abkar or being bikr, right?
I was waiting for. Okay, first I think Al-Hariri used to have a.
Hariri. Okay, yeah, there you go.
And then in the second one.
Up here.
Yeah.
What have you found?
The one that says the second, not second. Let's go on before that.
Oh.
Just if you go up more.
Up more? Oh, the second category?
Okay,
yeah.
So for i'rab here, you translated it as particular mood. I was just curious.
Mood? Right. I mean, I'll recheck it, but basically, for when we talk about rafa' and nasb and jar of asma, these are called the case. So the cases are called nominative, accusative, and then genitive, which is only for asma, right? But then in Arabic, we also have nasb and jar, nasb and rafa' and nasb for af'al, and we have jazm, we don't have jar. But for af'al, they're not called cases, they're called moods in English. For verbs, they have a mood, and the moods are called the indicative and the subjunctive and then the jussive. So the marfu' can either be nominative if it's a noun, or it can be indicative if it's a verb, imperfect verb, right? And then mansub can be accusative or it can be subjunctive, right?
And the last thing, under the third category, next page.
Yep.
It is said that this wow may appear with the meaning of al or, and on this basis, Malik interpreted, alms are only for the poor and the needy and.
Yeah, but I think in some of these cases you're just supposed to use your intelligence because he's interpreting it. If it just said or, if it just wrote or in the translation, then what is Malik interpreting?
I mean, that's because I'm assuming this is the whole difference between Imam Malik and Shafi'i. Like, is that what this is getting at? Where Imam Shafi'i says you would have to give,
You have to distribute across the asnaf.
yeah, versus or meaning you can, like the Hanafi position as well. I wasn't entirely sure on
I
that.
guess, and a footnote might be useful here. But in terms of what to do in the translation, I'm not sure. Like, okay, to be consistent, I guess. Generally, I translate it according to the wajh that's being described.
النوع الخامس الزائدة وخرج عليه آية واحدة من قوله وتله للجبين وناديناه. سادسها واو الضمير النوع.
Because the idea here is فلما أسلم, something happened. So then if you understand ناديناه to be the jawab, then the wa is zaida. Or if you understood فلما أسلم تله, if you understand that to be the jawab, then this wa is zaida. Right? But one or the other should be zaida according to that. Or neither is zaida and the jawab is mahdhuf. But that would be another thing. Okay.
السادس واو ضمير الذكور في اسم أو فعل نحو وإذا سمعوا اللغو أعرضوا عنه.
I mean, an example in Surah Yusuf, right? فلما أجمعوا أن يجعلوه في غيابة الجب وأوحينا إليه. Now, a lot of the translators just kind of took this as the jawab, and they have a wajh for that. They can say waw is zaida. If you ask them, I don't know how many of them will answer you, I think the waw is zaida, right? Or how many of them just thought, wow? Oh, wow. So, in any case, if you think the waw is zaida, you can say when they ajma'u, something like gathered their resolve to put him into the dark pit of the well, we called out to him. It could be. Or the jawab is mahdhuf. When they gather resolve, some terrible things happened which are so unspeakable that this jawab is going to be mahdhuf. Meanwhile, وَنَادَيْنَاهُ, right? هذا ما ذهبنا إليه.
قل لعبادي الذين آمنوا يقيموا الصلاة. النوع السابع واو علامة المذكورين في لغة طيء وخرج عليه وأسروا النجوى الذين ظلموا ثم عموا وصموا كثير منهم. النوع الثامن الواو المبدلة من همزة الاستفهام المضموم ما قبلها كقراءة قنبل وإليه النشور أمنتم قال فرعون آمنتم به.
You have to say it the right way, otherwise it won't work.
قال الكسائي كلمة تندم وتعجب وأصله ويلك والكاف ضمير مجرور. وقال الأخفش وي اسم فعل بمعنى أعجب والكاف حرف خطاب وأن على إضمار اللام والمعنى أعجب لأن الله. وقال الخليل وي وحدها وكأن كلمة مستقلة للتحقيق لا للتشبيه. وقال ابن الأنباري يحتمل وي كأنه ثلاثة أوجه أن يكون ويك حرفا وأنه حرف والمعنى ألم ترى وأن تكون كذلك والمعنى ويلك وأن تكون وي حرفا للتعجب وكأنه حرف ووصل خطأ لكثرة الاستعمال كما وصل يبن أمة.
So earlier on I had translated it as be amazed, isn't it? And then in the text it says أعجبوا, and then here it says إعجب. So maybe what happened is that I noticed maybe I noticed that issue before and I changed it to match. Like I might have chosen one or just made tarjih. Who knows? All distant past. Okay, last page I think.
أداة ويل. قال الأصمعي ويل تقبيح. قال الله تعالى ولكم الويل مما تصفون. وقد يوضع موضع التحسر والتفجع نحو يا ويلتنا يا ويلتى أعجزت. أخرج الحربي في فوائده من طريق إسماعيل بن عياش عن هشام أخرج الحربي في فوائده من طريق إسماعيل بن عياش عن هشام بن عروة عن أبيه عن عائشة قالت قال لي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ويحك فجزعت منها فقال لي يا حميراء إن ويحك أو ويسك رحمة فلا تجزعي منها ولكن اجزعي من الويل.
So I don't think he doesn't raise here that the very common thing which is said in some tafasir that wail is wadin fi jahannam. In the footnote, does it say that here? So we can simply understand it as a piece of language as it's given here, and sometimes in the tafasir it's understood, wailul lahum, like they will have that pit of fire. But I generally incline to take it in the way that it's described here.
هامش في إسناده إسماعيل بن عياش صدوق في روايته عن أهل بلده الشام ومخلط في غيرهم كما في التقريب، وروايته هنا عن غير أهل بلده أي عن هشام بن عروة وهو من أهل المدينة.
We're going to get into all that, are we? Are we going to talk next about the age of Aisha?
حرف لنداء البعيد حقيقة أو حكما، وهي أكثر أحرفه استعمالا، ولهذا لا يقدر عند الحرف سواها نحو رب اغفر لي. يوسف أعرض عن هذا، ولا ينادي اسم الله وأيها وأيتها إلا بها. قال الزمخشري وتفيد التأكيد المؤذن بأن الخطاب الذي يتلوه معتنى به جدا، أو ترد للتنبيه فتدخل على الفعل والحرف نحو ألا يسجدوا. يا ليت قومي يعلمون.
Maybe, according to what Suyuti says at the end of Allah, that it could have the meaning of like Allah yasjudu. Ya layta qawmi. Okay, yeah. Nida al-Ba'id. So I started one of the lectures above with I think the third in the Adawat, with a big rant about somebody talking about Ya being for Nida al-Ba'id. Whether literally or in another sense, that would be the thing that we said. It doesn't mean that if you said Ya Allah, which actually is not an established thing, but Ya Rabb occurs twice in the Qur'an. If that is used, it can be for like ta'zim, right? لهذا لا يقدر عند الحذف سواها. So when there is حذف of the adat, you assume that the taqdeer is ya. So when you say Rabbi ghfirli, the taqdeer is ya Rabbi. You don't say the taqdeer is a Rabbi, right? Yusuf a'rid, the taqdeer is ya Yusuf a'rid. ولا ينادى اسم الله وأيها وأيتها إلا بها. So you don't say Allah for nida. You do have Allahumma, as I pointed out in the footnote, but if you were to use an adat of nida, you would say Ya Allah. And by the way, you say it with Hamzatul Qata'. So you say Ya Allah and not Yallah. I know it's a Yalla, Yalla, Yalla. It's probably derived from that, I don't know. But Ya Allah. Sometimes you hear people, in the Imams in Tarawih, Ya Allah, and this is correct. Although in the Quran, we have Allahumma and not Ya Allah. So there you go. These are things that, to keep in mind with regards to that claim that we mentioned in the beginning of part 3 of the Adawat. Final note.
تنبيه. ها قد أتيت على شرح معاني الأدوات الواقعة في القرآن على وجه موجز مفيد محصل للمقصود منه، ولم أبسطه لأن محل البسط والإطناب إنما هو تصانيفنا في فن العربية وكتبنا النحوية، والمقصود في جميع أنواع هذا الكتاب إنما هو ذكر القواعد والأصول لا استيعاب الفروع والجزئيات.
جميل. وجزاك الله خيرا إمامنا السيوطي. We can certainly benefit from his works in Nahu, very important works, and those of others. And inshallah we proceed next time with the i'rab of the Quran. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.